Well, slurp-de-diddly-do, my G's. How are you guys all doing today? Hope you guys are doing wonderful. Hope you're enjoying the slurps and the slops and all of that good stuff. So, today we'll be talking about 7 universal tips for synthesis. I'm going to be using Vital for this demonstration, but rest assured, the concepts are universal. Before we dive in though, this video is sponsored by Psalms chapter 8. O Lord our God, the majesty and glory of your name fills all the earth and overflows the heavens. You have taught the little children to praise you perfectly. May their example shame and silence your enemies. When I look up into the night skies and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you have made, I cannot understand how you can bother with mere puny man to pay any attention to him. And yet you have made him only a little lower than the angels and placed a crown of glory and honour upon his head. You have put him in charge of everything you made, or everything is under his authority. All sheep and oxen and wild animals too, the birds and fish, and all the life in the sea. O Jehovah, our Lord, the majesty and glory of your name fills this earth. Right, so let's dive in. I've got 7 tips, as you can see on the screen, which I live and die by. Well, kind of. They're quite useful though, right? So, number 1, keep it simple, stupid. Oscillators. You can get a really long way in sound design with one oscillator. And if you're not even able to make great patches using one oscillator, then why are you using 2 or why are you using 3? You're just making it harder for yourself. So when you're doing sound design, like it's great to stack multiple shapes and different oscillators together as to make more complex sounds, you know? But when you simplify things and just use one, sometimes, in fact, more often than not, you'll actually get a more powerful sound. So think multiple oscillators, yeah, great, more complex things, but using one oscillator really, really well is just as good, if not better sometimes. Okay, so keep it simple with the oscillators. Don't go crazy, especially while you're learning, right? Okay, tip number 2. Pitching brings new life. So what do I mean by this? Well, there's multiple ways you can change the pitch. Obviously, you can pitch the actual oscillator using an LFO. Okay, that brings new life in a sense already, but when you're going deeper into sound design, doing lots more stuff as we'll go into with filters and effects, having the pitching movement running through everything right from the offset is going to bring a lot more life into the sound. And you don't have to do it just by moving the pitch. We could also have another square wave. So we're keeping it simple, stupid by just having another exact same square wave here, right? And just doing something as simple as detuning 2 squares together or from each other. That's obviously going to create new life as well, because now it's adding a rhythm into the sound. So, and that's just from the pitch being different on the 2 squares, right? So pitching is very important to bring life into the sound. Okay, so we always want to be aware of that. Number 3, aim for mid-range expression. So when we're doing our filtering, let's put these through a lovely low-pass filter. And then let's run this low-pass filter through into a secondary filter here. So the magic is in the mid-range with all sounds, with everything, vocals, leads, basses. You know, you can do a lot of crazy movements in the high end, which aren't as interesting. You can do some stuff in the lows. If you're careful, you can get some cool stuff there. But a lot of the expression from a sound is going to come from the mid-range. So when you're doing stuff like phaser filtering or notch filtering, or any kind of filter shapes, aiming for the mid-range is great. So I think 150 or 200 up to 600, this kind of zone. Let's get a bit of movement going on here. See how we got a bit of already got a bit of a kind of drum and bassy neurofunk sound just using a square wave, right? Because we kept it simple. And we're playing with the mid-range expression already, yeah? So that's really key to creating more interesting sounds. We want that movement and weight and everything to be happening from the mid-range, from the low mids as well. All right, so mid-range expression, always something to aim for. Tip number 4, you can always add stereo later. So what do I mean by that? I've kept everything in one voice here. It sounds great stereoed using 3 voices. Don't get me wrong, we might leave one of them on. But even if we don't, it's kind of more playing it safe, because if you stereo too far in the synth, you will not be you will lose the mono sort of power, and you won't be able to get that back again if you sacrifice it too early on. So, stereo, if you're doing stuff like this, you're adding stereo, but you're gonna lose a bit of mono power, right? But you can always add stereo in later. You can layer in extra stereo on top of the mono synth. I'm not saying that you have to make the whole synth in mono. I'm saying you don't go overboard in the stereo, because we can use stuff like the chorus, which is great in Vital, which adds a lovely stereo image. But even here, although it sounds really, really nice, we've gone too far with it already, because you can hear a lot of that main signal, that mono signal, you've sacrificed it because you've turned the mix up too high. So it's better to do very gentle stereo additions within the synth. This is around here, about 25%. That's a good trade-off where you lost a tiny bit of mono power, but you gained a lot of stereo. So that's sort of as far as I would go with stuff like the chorus, about 25%, maybe 30%, if I wanted to keep, enough bass power as possible in the mono. So don't worry, like, you can still add all these stereo things. Just do it in really small amounts, and just know that you can always add that extra stereo sound later outside of Vital in post-processing. Keep the original power within your synth and add new stereo layers to fit on top of the already powerful main signal that you've got, okay? So, tip number 5, try creating with distortion on. So this is really, really useful, because what you can do is you can turn up your distortion really high, perhaps the soft clipping or the hard clipping or whatever one you want to use. And then, you can start with the distortion on and then go back to your first page here and sort of redesign everything, okay? So let's try maybe different pitches. Try the different filter shapes. Okay, got some interesting stuff going on. Maybe put a bit of movement on this guy here. I feel like it's a little bit too fast still for me. So there you've unlocked a really nice low end kind of power in the sound here with the filter a bit lower now. So that's a really great starting point for a D&B bass, And if you go back to the distortion, I was, I found I found those sweet spots within the filter and within the pitching of the square wave by how it was going to eventually sound through the distortion, right? So as I mentioned here in the tip, try creating with the distortion on. It's that case of, how will the distortion affect everything you're doing? You don't know how it's going to affect it, right? So, but if you turn it on first before you start sound designing, turn the drive right up, and then see what you can create, going into distortion from the offset, and you'll get much different results that way. So that's really useful for getting new ideas going and cool sounds going, okay? So another one then, tip 6, randomize your LFO movements. So this is something I've been doing for years, and I coined this phrase, the LFO sandwich, which is basically where you modulate one LFO via another one. And so you've got your main LFO, LFO1, doing this movement here, and you set LFO2 to modulate the phase of LFO1, so the sort of start position. And now this is going to skip around all the time now. And then you go down to your second LFO, which controls all of that. Maybe make the grid a little bit bigger, so you've got a bit more space to play. So if the line is at the bottom now, it's not going to have any effect. It's just going to be LFO1 playing normally. But now we can draw some points where it comes up, for example. And then it's going to change the what LFO1 is doing, basically. So let's speed this one up a bit, maybe. So we can use it to create like sort of funkier rhythms. So now you've got you can imagine that with a beat, then you've got these much more funkier bass lines going on. I haven't added in a beat for this tutorial, I forgot to add one in. But that's basically, you can hear rather than it just doing the same, the same thing for the duration. No, it's just one, 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 one. But with all these kind of points in, with the modulating one LFO into another one. Now I can go boom, 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 Obviously I have to time it properly to the beat, but you've got to do that by ear, but it's really useful. That's a cool one. It's a lot easier to do it this way round, is what I'm saying, than to draw in all of those precise movements in one LFO. You just set your first one up to get the rhythm flow in, and then use your second one to create the changes in the rhythm, So that's really sick to create interesting bass lines. Finally, tip number 7, use dynamic EQ movements. So this is a great thing to do. There's a lot of effects I haven't even begun to use yet, like the compressor. It's quite nice. You can put a bit of dynamic flavor on the mix of this one on the main LFO here. You can do a bit more filtering again as well before we finish here. Maybe put a little bit of movement on this guy as well. And you can always mix these filters off again as well. But anyway, the point is dynamic EQing. So you can use the EQ within the synth. Remember, this is everything I'm doing here applies to other synths too, right? Faceplant, Serum, Current, whatever else you like to use, FM8. I don't know, Massive. Same principles, right? So dynamic EQ is basically you've got this sort of main LFO movement going, and you can you can exaggerate, for example, the high end. We put a gain on a high shelf of the whole kind of sound with the EQ here. And now, especially if I exaggerate this filter a bit more here. So now you can see here how it's a bit flat before the EQ, and then putting the EQ on. Especially with these kind of sounds where you've low passed a square or something, maybe you've taken out some high end. Now you've got this chance to like bring up the high end again with an EQ, which is something that's always useful to do. And you can do this dynamically, so boosting that sort of EQ shelf, high shelf, like in line with your main movement that you've got within the patch. You know, something really nice to do at the end as like a final, like give everything a bit of an extra dynamic kind of flair, like a bit of a dynamic push to everything that you've already done. So it's great to do this. Works particularly well with high shelves, sorry. But you could try it with other things. You could try like you could try like a band. Maybe you want to boost like the mid-range somewhere. Maybe you could try that on there as well. Maybe make it a bit wider here. That's quite nice too. Kind of like you're doing, almost like you're doing filter movements again, you know, but you've got a bit more control. And especially, I just like to do it mostly on the high end at the end. It always adds a nice little kind of dynamic brightness boost onto the sound. So those are my 7 tips. I could think of lots more, but I just wanted, I could talk forever about it, you know, but these are 7 really useful tips in my opinion. So hopefully they're helpful for you guys. Keep it simple, stupid with your oscillators. Don't have to do loads of crazy amounts of oscillators. You complicate the sound design process a lot more and often reduce the leftover sort of cohesiveness of the shape that you're building, you know? So simple oscillators are sometimes really, really useful. Pitching brings new life, you know, as I was doing for this one, you know, detuning 2 squares to create rhythms and new movements, giving life. But also you could pitch things, you know, you could some little subtle pitch movements in the sort of fine tuning as well on your LFO. It's going to help to give a bit more realism into the patch too. Number 3, mid-range expression. Get all that juicy movement. Find those juicy growls, especially for drum and bass. Like in the mid-range area with your filtering especially, you know. Or you can always add stereo later, so remember, you know, you don't always have to unison stuff. In fact, you'll lose a lot of the mono power when you do. And you don't, when you're using stereo effects like chorus, delay, flanger, reverb, all of that stuff, be gentle on the mix. Really, be really gentle. Because if you go too far, you'll lose too much mono power. You won't be able to get it back. But if you need more stereo, you could do it outside of the synth easily. Right? Number 5, creating with the distortion on. Great way to unlock new tones and, you know, ideas for sound design. Yeah, as with this sort of reverse engineering mindset, you know, turning the distortion first thing you do when you open the synth, and then seeing, you know, how different things respond when they run through distortion, like square waves, sine waves, particularly works well on simple shapes as well. All right. And then randomizing your LFO movements, like I showed you, routing one LFO into the phase position of another to generate more random movements, and then using that to get more happy accidents and interesting rhythms rather than sitting there trying to imagine a rhythm and draw it in yourself. Can often, you know, be an easier hack to get better bass lines by letting these random accidents happen. And then finally using dynamic EQ movements, so paying a bit of attention to the EQ at the end of your sound design and sort of seeing if you can enhance the sound any more, and even putting some of those EQ movements on the LFO to give like a further dynamic lift to the whole sound, you know? So there you have it, my G's. That's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, I'll leave it with you there for today. Links and resources are down below. You can find vital presets and much more down there as well. All right, that's it for me today. More from me in the next one. Peace out. Much love.